Morning, members. Welcome to this continuation of the council meeting from yesterday. This is becoming rather repetitive, to be honest. We have had over the last year a number of council meetings which have lasted 2 days. And to be honest, we need to find some way of delivering council meetings that we can finish in a day. Having them go on and on for 2 days, I don't think is acceptable. There's a significant cost involved, but it's also very disruptive for members who have other things to normally in their diaries for a Friday. So I think we'll be looking towards making some form of proposals that will prevent this. Councillor Christie, I wasn't expecting a debate.
I'd just like to say that I'd be quite happy to work constructively with yourself and the leader of the council to find different solutions that perhaps might modernise the way we do things and make it more efficient. So, as I say, these times my door is open.
Appreciate that, Alistair. And I'll try and organise a meeting that we can discuss this with committee services as well. So, thank you, members. Stuart, you can call the roll as such, diminished though it may be.
Thank you, convener. Good morning, members. So, members in the chamber, just ask you to confirm your attendance by pressing the green button when the lights start to flash. Thank you. So if everybody's voted in the chamber, we'll close the vote down. Thank you. And then we have a number of members participating through Teams. I've tried to take a note of names. I'll go through the names that I have, and when I reach the end, if there's anybody I've missed, if you'd let me know. But I'll start with Councillor Baird.
Present.
Councillor Baldry.
Present.
Councillor Bruce.
Present.
Councillor Cameron.
Present.
Councillor Campbell Sinclair.
Present.
Councillor Collier. Councillor Finlayson.
Present.
Councillor Gregg. Councillor Mrs Jarvie.
Morning, present.
Councillor Johnson. Councillor Kraft.
Present.
Councillor Isabel Mackenzie.
Present. Thank you, Stuart.
Councillor Mackey.
Good morning, Stuart. I am present.
Councillor McLennan.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Morning, present.
Councillor Polly Munro.
Present.
Councillor Patterson. Councillor Rosie.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Stewart.
Good morning, Stuart. I'm here.
Convener, we also had a number of additional apologies in addition to Councillor Crawford and Councillor McEwen from yesterday, and they are from Councillor Burt and Councillor McGilvray.
Sorry, I am here. It's Councillor Johnston.
Councillor Christie.
Yes, I believe Councillor Gregg's been called to work.
Are there any additional declarations of interest from yesterday?
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think one this morning from Councillor McLean, Angela McLean, in respect of item 23.4, as owner of our camper van, and she will leave the chamber.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener. I would like to issue a transparency statement in relation to my member's motion, as I do have a croft, but applying the objective test, I do not have a declaration of interest.
Okay, members, we now move to item 16, which is the annual report, statutory performance indicators, benchmarking and best value 22-23. Donna.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, members. The report before you today provides information which will be used and published in order to meet the statutory requirements for the reporting of the Council's performance. There are three aspects to the information. Firstly, we have reported upon the Council's statutory performance indicators for 22-23. This information has been summarised in section 5.1 of the report, which shows that we had 80 SPIs in total, and currently the data is available for 69 of these. And I'm still awaiting the benchmarking data on 11 of the children's services indicators. I'm pleased to report that overall performance has improved since that reported last year, whereby 53 or 77% of the indicators were on target or within the performance thresholds, compared to 68% last year. And I'm reporting there's 16 that were not on target this year, which is 23% compared to 32% last year. Detailed information is set out in Appendix 1, which shows performance against target for 22-23, which is then ragged, plus the progress of performance for the last 3 years. You will note that in some cases we have not met our targeted performance, but the indicator shows an improving performance over the last 3 years. Where any of the SPIs have been ragged as red, i.e. they're not on target, then these have a note with commentary below, which sets out the reasons we've identified for that performance and the improvement actions identified. Secondly, we are expected to benchmark our performance against other councils, and we use a selection of the LGBF data for this purpose. This information is provided in Appendix 2, which shows the 22-23 performance against target, as well as our benchmark ranking for the current and previous years. I've also provided a link to the full LGBF data published in section 5.3. At section 5.4, I've outlined the emerging data trends that have been identified by the Improvement Service from their published data, and you'll note that a number of these are actually applicable to the Council. Section 5.5 provides a link to the National Overview Report, which provides valuable contextual information and assists in understanding some of the challenges that councils are facing and could impact upon their performance. I do appreciate it's quite a long report, but I would commend members to actually read that report. It is very useful. There's also reference in the report for the need for councils to transform in order to ensure their financial sustainability, and I've provided some examples in the report, and members will recognise links with a number of other reports that have been on this council's agenda. Finally, in section 6, I've set out the revised approach followed by Audit Scotland in their audit of best value. I'd like to highlight that the second thematic review of workforce innovation is currently underway, and that they've also indicated their statutory report work is scheduled to be undertaken between October 24 and August 25. Thank you, members, and happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Loudon.
Thank you,
convener, and thanks Donna for the report. You know, it's very detailed, and it's always very informative in letting the council find out where it is, both in terms of previous years and also comparatively. So thanks for the report you've compiled. Yeah, I'm struck there's always a challenge in preparing this report between completeness and timeliness. So you know you've always got blanks in the report, which can't be avoided because the information isn't available at the time that the report is compiled. But equally, if you hold on until all the information is compiled, it's appearing so late that it's almost superseded by the previous years. So by the following year. So yeah, so there's a challenge there. I will be moving the recommendations when I conclude. But just in terms of some of the items you referred to, you know, we have seen some areas where we have been behind our target, but we've seen significant improvements. Cost per attendance at sport facilities, an area of big improvement. Business gateway starts, again, an area of big improvement. We're not quite there yet, but we're making big improvements. And the average time to complete emergency house repairs, a big improvement, and asset management suitability for our own estate. Not quite there yet, but again, a big improvement. So what I want to do, I mean, apart from thanking the officers involved in producing the report, is to thank all the officers involved in improving the performance of the council. And I hope that all the members in the chamber will join me in doing that. So I move the recommendations as set out in the report and look for a seconder.
Councillor Balance.
Thank you, convener, and thank you very much indeed for the report and the very large amount of work which must have gone into producing it and compiling all the statistics. It is appreciated. I think it shows that whilst 20% of the targets have no significant progress, there is clearly room for regular review of the targets and whether we're missing. Clearly, a lot of those are due to factors which are way beyond our control, but nevertheless, the need for continual examination and scrutiny of the targets is, I think, important. I've got 3 questions, and if the council leader is going to get up on his feet, I have one question for him. Firstly, the KPI on sickness days per lost employee is a particularly worrying statistic here. I think it's now 50% higher than it was in 2021. So I'm just wondering what is being done to ascertain why this is going up and what is being done to address it. Then we've got the carbon emissions, which are 10% up on last year, but the performance is marked as green on target. And the target for emissions, if I'm reading this correctly, is 33% higher than the emissions have been at any point in the last 3 years. So I'm just wondering what is going on here. How is this explained? And are the targets aligned with the administration's 2035 target? And a question for the council leader. If the SNP is as serious about reaching net zero as it claims to be, can you revise those emission targets downwards in order to get to net zero earlier? Because I think we have to remember that if our target is merely to meet the minimum legal requirement, then if we miss that target at all at any point in the next 10 years, then we are in breach of the law. And let's remember that net zero is not the point at which we improve the climate and make adjustments, positive adjustments. It's merely the point at which we stop things getting worse. So the target at the moment is to continue to add to global emissions over the next 11 years. And if there's anything we can do to reduce that further, I'd be very appreciative of it. Finally, the target for accidental injury is significantly higher than the actual figure, as is, for example, the percentage of procurement spent in local communities. And I just wonder if there's room for revising some of these targets so that we push for continual improvement. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the report. That was a lot of work. So obviously went into this. It's very, very helpful. I would just like to pick up on a number of points. The first one being actually a point Councillor Balance made regarding the procurement. You know, some of these targets aren't stretching targets. I think that's something that for continual improvement, we really need to start getting better at. We need to be always looking to the future and looking at how we can do better, you know, especially in the areas where we've already been doing good. It's how do we strive for excellence. Now, my second point is on the targets which are benchmarked on looking at other local authorities, looking at the family group average. And I appreciate that some of those targets obviously cannot be included in this report. But again, I think when it comes to setting stretching targets and pushing performance, we should really be reviewing how we set our targets to benchmark against ourselves. We know what we're looking for next year will be better than what we've got this year. And the third point I'd like to pick up on is one that I've raised many times in this chamber, is to do with the planning performance. You know, that's an area that's consistently getting worse. And I appreciate from the explanatory note that there's been additional staff recruited. But I would just like to highlight to members, I think the industry figure is there's around £70,000 worth of tax to this council will be collected over the lifespan of a single dwelling house, and the amount of time and delays for the major development category is one that is causing significant concern for me, because you know what this is saying. We discussed this at the meeting yesterday, is we do not want the Highlands to appear closed for business. We don't want the Highlands to be anti-development, anti-business. So I think we've got to really look at how we can put adequate resource and further resource to make sure that this service can deliver for the businesses of Highland and indeed for the people of Highland, because you know we talk about depopulation, we talk about not enough housing, but you know we're seeing this, and there's a significant backlog that we do need to work to clear. But overall, I think it's a very good report, and I'm glad to see that we are making progress on quite a few of these performance indicators, and I do hope that we can set stretching targets to make sure that we're always going to be improving where we can.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, members. Yeah, I'd like to thank Donna Sutherland and her colleagues for this report, and I would like to concentrate on page 198, Appendix 1, and it's under Children's Services. And the first line there of school meals, we've seen a reduction from £6.77 per meal provided in the year 2021, and down to £4.44 in 22-23, and a target to just under £5 is the area we're aiming at. So just curious to know what's behind that. Is it greater efficiency? Is it less food waste that's on that? And the very next line is school transport. We've seen the huge costs of there. I mean, it's eye-watering in 22-23, just short of £1,700 per pupil transported is the cost. So it's a huge, huge cost to this council. The target, obviously, 1,450 is still a big, big number. And is this something that the council can look forward to achieving? I know that when the Executive Chief Officer, Malcolm MacLeod, heralded the arrival of the new buses and minibuses with the council, that he said it would save this council tens of thousands of pounds taking it in-house. Is that still the case? And are we on target to deliver these cost savings? Thank you.
Thank you, members. I think to Councillor Loudon, it's just a case of thank you very much for your comments there. Councillor Balance, your three questions, sickness absence, I'm aware one of the issues is basically a carryover from COVID, whereby there's a number of individuals that are waiting on hospital treatment. Long-term conditions and delays getting operations has been a problem. That is part of the national picture as well, is recognised to be the case. The processes within the council, we do have an attendance management process that has to be followed, but unfortunately, if it's something out with our control, i.e., someone waiting on hospital operation, then we are quite limited as to what we can do. But all managers should robustly apply the attendance management process to ensure that we are taking all appropriate action in order to reduce sickness levels. Carbon emissions, the reason for that is it's green as we are below the target, but I have been advised that it is actually, this information goes to the Climate Change Committee, but officers will get some specific information to me that I can respond to you with regard to that. And I've also been advised for 22-23, one of the reasons for the increase was we included the Corn Ferry in the figures for the first time. So obviously that would have an impact there, and that information did go through the Climate Change Committee. The accident rate percentage, I think it's a percentage of the overall staffing numbers and applying sort of an industry ratio there, but I will double check with the appropriate officers as to what that relates to. All right, Councillor Stewart, your point about stretching targets, yes, you are correct there, and we are looking at doing that. Obviously, we've taken into account now, we've come through the worst of COVID, which affected performance. So now it is discussions with services to ensure that we have stretching targets, but also that they are realistic targets. But obviously the aim is for us to improve performance where we can. Planning performance is just really the information that I've set out there. So in particular, within the response there, we have made reference to the fact that the planning service have some new members of staff, which will help alleviate some of the backlogs there, but it is recognised it will take some time for them to bed in. So we are looking for expecting improved performance moving forward. Councillor McPherson, your question about school meals. I've been advised that there are general efficiency measures within procurement and waste. And within the costs, we do include all of our costs, including staffing, whereas if we compare to some other councils, they don't actually do that. So it is reflective of the full cost of service provision. I think that's all the questions.
That's all of them.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, school transport.
Could you repeat your question then, please, Councillor McPherson?
It was just the big variance is 22-23. It was almost £1,700 for school transport, and the target to 1450. By us bringing the buses in-house, is that likely to likely to be achieved now?
Yeah, so I think we have to understand, and I think you would understand this, Councillor McPherson, we've had exponential costs in transportation for school pupils post-COVID, and with all the inflationary factors that the private sector was affected by, I think we then bore those additional costs. So whether we're talking cost avoidance or whether we're talking genuine savings, there are definite efficiencies in some of the more in-house provision. And obviously we continue to try to protect ourselves from future risk of market failure, but it's a very delicate area because obviously the companies are running on pretty thin margins, even though we're bearing exponential growth in cost. And if you look at some of the overspends we're bearing on that economy and infrastructure side, quite a few of them are to do with bus transportation costs.
Councillor Oldham.
Yes, thank you, Convener, and thank you, Jonathan, and the staff for the report. Just harking back to yesterday in item 15, One of the things I'm hoping will come out of that data, as I said yesterday, is that make Donna's life easier in future. But I just have one little question. Libraries is my fascination at the moment because of what's going on there. On page 204, where you have net cost cost per visit for libraries. Curiously, although the cost has gone down in 22-23, the progress indicator is showing a red and a downward arrow, and I didn't quite understand why. I couldn't see anything in the commentary that explained, so I was wondering whether you could explain that one. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
Very much. Thank you, Donna. I just wanted to talk about the kingship and foster care numbers. Members will be aware that kingship and foster care has been a priority for the council with significant investment over the last year. So in terms of what we're doing and what we've done, although through the Family First strategy, we plan to build on the recent review of kingship and develop a kingship care service to ensure we offer strong support. Innovative new ways using digital technology are also planned to support the Highland foster care recruitment. These programmes are part of a 3-year strategy linked to the HOAP, and that was discussed yesterday. As you know, the Family First strategy has accelerated in 23-24 to safely keep children with families in Highland. As previously reported, total looked after figures are decreasing. Now, specifically looking at the data, today in respect of the kingship, in 2021, we had 95 children in residence kingship care orders. As of the 1st of March this year, we had 124 children secured under these orders with families. That is a 30% increase. The performance indicator articulates the stage targets from 22-23 to 26-27. But I'm delighted to report that as of the 1st of March 2024, we're currently at 26%, which is above the target set for 26-27. And I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate everyone involved in not only exceeding the target well ahead of schedule, but more importantly, improving the lives of our young people involved. Thank you.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to the officer and our colleagues for this report. I just thought I'd pick out some of the areas where we are doing well, and I fully acknowledge some of these are balanced by areas or SPIs where work is to be done and much more progress is to be made. For example, the cost of non-domestic rate collection per property is now nearly 25% below target. The costs of administrating the benefits we disperse has fallen to nearly 25% below the target cost. The proportion of women managers in the top 2% of our workforce has been above target for the last 2 years and has increased year on year. We've touched on the non-sickness absence days per employee. We didn't mention we'd actually ranked second in Scotland, having slipped from first place than the previous year. We're almost 25% below the Scottish average, 9 days per year in Highland. So we must thank and congratulate all the officers and all the teams involved in meeting targets, who at the same time, and knowing how hard they work, they will be acutely aware of where work is required or where a change of approach should be taken to make progress and to reach your targets as part of a culture of continuous improvement. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thanks to Don and her colleagues for all the work that's gone into this exercise, which I know is a difficult and demanding exercise. I think, Convener, looking at the use of time for meetings and so on, I think you'll agree that this kind of public scrutiny of the council's performance is a very good use of councillors' time. There's certainly one particular aspect that I wouldn't like to see an economy of time made where we're publicly discussing how well the council has carried out its provided its services over the year. I just want to make one quick comment. Page 77, where
So there are some indicators for which data is awaited or no data is available. Will these be reported next time? It wouldn't be good to have the same indicators continue to have no data or not be reported. So perhaps maybe ensuring that maybe next time that these are picked up wherever possible. And the one indicator that caused me quite a lot of concern is on page 84, the school attendance rate, which runs at 90%, so that on any school day in this council, 10% of the pupils are not present. I think that's quite worrying. I think a target of 90.2% is a sort of acceptance of that situation. Now, I don't know how that compares to other authorities or historically, but I certainly think historically the attendance rate in our schools was much better than 90%. And we're all aware that COVID and the pandemic has dealt a blow to school attendance and to some degree to work possibly within the school. So I would just say I think that's quite a worrying indicator that 10% of our children, any day of the year, 10% or so will be absent. And I hope that is something that perhaps the council could look at to try and remedy over a period of time to get the attendance rate back up to what I think would be a better figure. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Finlayson.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get my mouse going there. I know some members think that I'm Mr. Good News, and I think it's really important to mention our positive destination data, which has now come through, and the data for 22-23 is at an all-time high of 95.27%. And that shows that over 39% of our young people are going into employment, 20.5 into further education, 33 into higher education. And the cohort this year was 2,474 pupils. So I think that's very good news. The question I've got, I think other members have raised this, is maybe the timing of the report. And I suppose my question is, have we got flexibility in when we bring this report? I know that Councillor Loudon has said we bring it too early, we don't have some data. If we bring it too late, then the data's out of date. So I suppose it's really important to consider, when we bring the data. Looking at the report in terms of the SCQF data, that will come to the Education Committee. And I suppose what Councillor Graham's asking there about when will this data come forward, I think it's important to remember that the data comes to strategic committees first, or maybe later, but it always comes to some kind of a committee, so there is governance over the data, and I think that's important. In terms of the issue raised around about school attendance by Councillor Graham, I fully agree. It's really important that we keep an eye on this. And I know that at school level, certainly our staff are doing lots and engaging with families and engaging with young people to see that school attendance is improving. I personally have got a sneaking suspicion that a lot of the attendance issues we've got may be on a Friday. And I've heard anecdotally that quite often young people, for whatever reason, particularly at secondary level, sometimes I wouldn't say write off a Friday, but it's a day. So it'd be quite interesting, Donna, if we could maybe get additional data around, is it a Friday that's affecting our data in terms of school attendance? Thank you.
Well, maybe you want to take one.
Okay, with regard to the questions from Councillor Graham, the children's services data isn't yet available. Now, maybe picking up the point from Councillor Finlayson as well with regard to the timing of this report. We have to report on our SPIs by 31st of March of this year. So that's why I have this report whereby I'm still waiting on the data for 11 indicators. That information isn't yet available. We can produce our own data relatively quickly, but when it comes to the benchmarking data, we submit that probably late summer into the improvement service. They collect that information from all 32 authorities, And then we start getting the benchmark data from December onwards. Some of it comes December, and then there's quite a bit comes in February as well. So that's the reason for the time lag. With regard to the missing children's services data, as Councillor Finlayson said, I think we'll probably put that information to the Education Committee, but I'm quite happy if members so ask that I can provide an updated report to Council if you want with regard to those 11 indicators once they're available. And if I can maybe hand over to the Chief Executive, if you would, Rena, who'll answer about school attendance. Thank you.
So I'm conscious, Councillor Graham, that Councillor Finlayson sort of answered part of your question, and to Councillor Finlayson, we will have a look at the Friday issue to see if that is a pattern. And broadly speaking, all authorities were affected by attendance post-COVID, and there is still a period of recovery, but it is a larger figure than we would want, and it's a larger figure than it was before COVID. So obviously there's a whole load of things in there around health and wellbeing, around how young people are reached by schools and by other partners. So it is definitely a piece of work we need to continue to look at, but we'll definitely have a look at the attendance issues through the Education Committee, and in particular we'll have a look at this Friday issue that Councillor Finlayson's raised.
Sorry if I missed some questions. I think I probably incorporated Councillor Finlayson's and Councillor Graham's together.
Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning. And thank you, Donna, for the report. It would be useful for the next report if you could make a way of cross-referencing between the same measures that appear in Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. Just, I had to look for them, and the only way I could check that I actually married the right ones up was by looking at the performance in the actual percentage numbers. So if that could be done, that would be really helpful, I think useful. I think there's a remarkable set of statistics in here which show that we're actually doing some really good work, considering the backdrop of what the improvement service says at 5.4 in terms of Scottish Government that's cut our core funding, that's asking us to do more with less. In terms of the staff absence pressures across the whole of Scotland, which we're seeing in our statistics, and the delayed hospital treatment that is impacting people and stopping them from returning to work, and the delayed discharges. And, going on and on about the less money we have to spend on education. I think these figures are remarkable set against the backdrop of adequate funding from a government that's quite clearly doesn't have local government at the top of its priority list. And I think when we delve into some of these statistics, we can see some, going behind them, we can see some benefits to our community and also benefits to so many individuals that require our services. Just picking a few out, I noticed that the delivery plan yesterday, I wasn't going to speak on this particular point today, but Councillor Fraser raised it, talks about the need to recruit foster carers. It says in this report that we recruited 8 in 22-23, yet that's the same target in the delivery plan. Doesn't strike me as particularly ambitious, and it might be something we need to revisit when we look at the delivery plan in May, that to actually pick a target of one we've already achieved when we actually had a higher target, perhaps is just is not actually looking for a stretch aim, and maybe we should be looking for stretch aims as well in the delivery plan when it comes back. I think the danger of some of these statistics is the fact of our demographics and our geography, that we always are going to apparently score worse than other authorities. If you compare Clackmannanshire and other places with Highland, what's the point? Yet they're included in the 32, and I do take and always have done, regardless who's in administration, a pinch of salt with some of the rankings on this. And indeed, to be worst, or number 32 on something, could actually mean you're providing the best service in Scotland for some of your people, residents, and I think we've got to bear that in mind, especially when we look at care at home and issues like that. In the smaller authorities, care at home is a bit of a doddle. but sending someone to Durness, to deliver care at home suddenly becomes a logistical exercise in itself, let alone for the care that needs to be provided to the individual when the person gets to Durness. So I often think that we beat ourselves up unnecessarily, and we get contrasted with other authorities in a way that we were just going to lose to begin with. It's just not worth it. But I think our congratulations need to go to all the staff that actually contribute behind the scenes on this report. And I think, when we look at it again next year, perhaps we can have some of the answers to the points that Councillor Graham has made. I've got my own thoughts on absence from school, having a 16-year-old daughter, as to why the absentee rate might be high, might be other things that the child legitimately wants to do that is a benefit to the child's education, but actually necessitates an absence from school. And sometimes I think perhaps when we mark an absence down, we're just marking the fact the child's not at school. What the child's doing whilst not at school might be of more value to that child's career or learning than going to school. I don't know, but I think we've got to look at some of the data behind it. But overall, I think it's an excellent report, which I welcome. And if you could just reference the two appendices, it'll make my life easier next year. Thank you.
Councillor Gill.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Donna, for the report. There's lots of good stuff in there. It's good to see that the things that we're really excelling in, and my thanks to all the officers who are involved in doing that. I just got a couple of things I would just like some clarity on. Looking at page 215, looking at the Avonlea home, and it was in July 22. It was an unsatisfactory report, and then we note further down that it was closed in September of 2022. My concern is what happened to the children who were being cared for at that location. We've obviously reduced our capacity in terms of childcare. What was it that caused the closure? Was it the inadequate building, or what? Just can we get some clarity on that, and what happened to the children that were previously being cared for there? And then on page 216, I'm very conscious of the fact we're looking back 2 years here, so it's quite difficult to understand exactly what happened back in September 22. But we're looking at the care inspectorate report for fostering services, and the report that was in September 22 showed we were weak in 3 different areas. And as a result, it said the inspectors identified 7 requirements and 5 areas of improvement. Now, I see that there's been an action plan put in place, which is great, and it's encouraging. And there's been a number of the actions have been rated as green or amber. Are these actions that we're self-assessing ourselves, or is it something that says when would we expect our next care inspectorate report to give us an update on where we actually currently are? And it does concern me if we are trying to recruit foster parents, and yet we're saying that how well do we support people's well-being? Weak. How good is our leadership? Weak. How well is our care and support plan? Weak. What encourages foster carers to come into to become fosterers if this is the kind of report that we're issuing? So if I get some clarity on that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, convener, and a lot has been said already, so my comment's quite short, really. Thank you for the report, Donna. I believe the value of the KPIs as how we look after our citizens. For example, the gross rent arrears, this is on page 207, is ragged red. The legislation to protect tenants being evicted under the Cost of Living Scotland Act has only been extended to the end of this month. Having this data enables all of us to be aware of how sometimes external factors affect some in our society. So we must use this information to keep a close review on how the council can help us. So it's very, very valuable. Thank you very much.
Councillor Campbell Sinclair.
Thank you, convener. I'm going to follow on Jackie Henry with quite a similar similar comments, obviously, that we work very closely together. We're on the same page with this. First of all, Donna, I'll have to say that the report's in a really good and very easy to understand format. And in general, I think our performances are very, very good. With regards to the rent arrears, in my opinion, are really, really good, despite perception that performance is not what it should be. We are actually the 5th in Scotland when it comes to these figures. As Jackie said, the Cost of Living Scotland Act was passed by the Scottish Government on the 6th of October 2022, and it suspended evictions in most circumstances. This will be in place until the end of the month. And that was put in place in the cost of living crisis. Now, given the factor that we're 5th in Scotland, is really an excellent result. And I have to say that that is a credit to our housing services officers. All in all, I think that is a very, very good report, and it does what it says on the tin. So thanks to officers. I know it's a really, really laborious job collecting all these figures, so well done to the team.
Councillor Logue.
Thank you, convener. I've just got 2 quick questions. Firstly, on street lighting energy consumption, there's been quite a marked drop this year compared to last year, about a 10% drop. So, I mean, I assume that's because of more efficient LED lighting. Are there any other reasons, like turning off street lights, for example? And my second question is on page 209. The target for women managers in top 2% is 41.1%. I'd have thought it would be 50%. So just the justification behind that. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you very much for the report. I found it really interesting to read. I was just wondering if I could get a bit more information on page 203.8. It says that some contracts for care delivery have been handed back by the providers, and I was just wondering to get a bit more information on that and see whether we had a strategy to tackle and overcome it. Thank you.
Councillor Finney.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the report. And as my predecessors have we've just spoken, said, it's a very useful tool to celebrate what we're doing well and to highlight the areas we need to improve. Most of the emails I receive from constituents are about housing, so I want to have a look at housing services, picked on that particular section. And when I say housing, they're mainly about repairs, but also urgent needs for accommodation. So I totally accept the findings and agree that progress has to be made in the completion of housing repairs, but perhaps more planning ahead with more maintenance plans to ensure that repairs and emergency repairs are not needed in the first place. Is what we will need, and I'm sure we are working towards that. But let's celebrate, the progress and the priority. I sense there is a sense of priority in the progress that is highlighted in this section. I welcome the hard work to ensure that homes are not left empty and are relet as soon as possible. And of course, having a roof above your head is a basic human right. And again, I welcome the progress and the hard work in reducing the duration for all homelessness applications. Thank you very much.
Marvin May, could you just repeat your question, please? I missed it.
It was on page 203.8. It said that some contracts for care delivery have been handed back by the providers. So I was just looking to get a bit more information on that and whether we've got any strategies to overcome and tackle it. Thank you.
Councillor McCallum, I'll get information for you on that. I don't have it to hand, but I will get it for you. Apologies for not having it to hand. Can I just pick up on a couple of Councillor Gale's questions, if that's okay? So first of all, I've advised by my colleague that a few things might be helpful to you. There's an inspection currently being done in fostering and adoption, and the updated report on that will go to the Health and Social Care Committee. But obviously you can understand since the last inspection, obviously a whole load of actions have been rolled up in terms of children's services planning, and they've been subject to the annual Chief Social Work Officer report. The other thing to say is that Avonlea House is now closed. Work is in relation to Thor House and respite is ongoing. On the issue about the stretch target for foster care, takes 6 months to do an assessment of a foster carer, obviously. So that's one of the reasons why it takes a bit of time. So for the service, with the current capacity they have, they do feel as though they've set themselves a stretch. But Councillor Christie, I'm going to take that away and have a think about it for the reiteration of the final delivery plan with my colleague Fiona Duncan.
I must apologise, Councillor Oldham. I forgot to answer your earlier question. Just to explain, the format of the report is we've got the performance against target, which is looking at the 22-23 performance against the target for the year. The progress column is actually me trying to have, it's slightly scientific, but not fully scientific, I've got to say, if that makes sense, whereby I'm looking at how the performance has been over the last 3 years. So with regard to libraries, it has kind of dipped a little bit. So whilst it's green, because it's within the target, it's that bit. So that explains why that's red. And the question from Councillor Logue, yes, it is in respect of LED lighting, and my understanding is we're also using CELIX funding to undertake those works as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bremner.
Thank you, Convener. There was a question posed to me, and I think that Councillor Balance knows that I've been corresponding with him during the debate, but I think it's only right that since he asked it in the public domain, I should give folks the benefit of understanding what I've been saying. But both Councillor Balance and Councillor McPherson have raised emissions and their contributions. Councillor McPherson asked if we could change our targets to earlier than the Scottish Government targets. We can, but only if this is based on a data-led approach, and setting dates that we can't meet is obviously a bit meaningless. So we can set our own targets, but this needs to be based on data, not just aspiration. We're going to, we're doing that data analysis across the whole estate in order to identify a meaningful stretch target, rather than setting something that is unachievable, which is what happened previously. But this work's going to be taken through the Climate Change Committee and Councillor Balance. In terms of actually doing that, that would be a decision of the council, not something that I would be able to commit to. It was interesting, Councillor Christie was mentioning about stretch aims being considered, and was talking about recruitment of foster carers. I think that we can reflect on that, but I think it would be more for the performance plan rather than the actual delivery plan. Care at home delivery is a point that has been well noted and referenced at Highland Council here, and also the same has been raised at COSLA in spades in terms of the uniqueness of Highland Council and its challenges in providing that. In Councillor Graham, in terms of the points that you made, I thought that we actually looked at analysis of attendance in each of the area committees under the ASG when they're reported to the area committees. I've just asked the question there just now. I think that information is different in area committees, and a point of a bit of frustration. So I think that what we need to do is standardise that, because certainly I'm aware of some of the. I was wondering why you said that, but I think that it's needing standardised. not just for in certain areas, but against Highland and against Scotland, as I get it for our area. So that would be good to look at. And I was going to reference another point about Celix, but that's already been done. Thanks.
Councillor McLean, Angela.
Thank you, convener. I was just going to pick up on a couple of points, and as has already been said, this is already out of date in some ways because we've moved forward. And some of it is about unintended consequences as well as we make changes, whether that be through the budget or elsewhere. I mean, a couple of councillors mentioned about the moratorium on evictions, and that was something to welcome, especially during COVID, and it helped citizens remain safe. But now that we're coming to the end of that, those citizens or tenants that are in have landlords, they've got to now take their landlord to court in order to prove that they are being evicted before housing then say that they are going to become homeless until this is lifted at the end of the month. And that's having an effect on a number of people in my own ward that have contacted me, but also it's having an impact on CAB because they're then having to pick up on that work, which is an unintended consequences of a good thing. And I suppose another unintended consequence is that Highland Council took the decision when properties become empty that we'll be looking to save money to have it done in-house, which means repairs take longer, and therefore it takes longer for the houses to then be allocated, which one of the other councillors picked up on was yourself, but how quickly we can allocate properties to people on the homeless register. So, and that's another issue that's been raised in my ward, and I'm sure it's been raised elsewhere. So it's kind of the unintended consequences when we get these indicators, and then again at service committees we're told about how long it takes for a house to be reallocated, or then it affects the statistics that Highland Council are showing. So it's to kind of look at how do we improve and how do we not result in unintended consequences to another part of the service. And a good thing I wanted to pick up was on High Life Highland and the libraries. I've got different kinds of library sizes, and I'm sure we all have. And sometimes it's down to the individuals that work in the libraries, the added value that they can bring to the library. I have craft classes happening in Dingwall, Friday Lego, should go along. There's stuff happening in Muirvord in the library there too. And it's all that added social inclusion that's not really part of how many hours the library's open, how many people come in and out, that are going to help as we move forward to look at place-based planning, 20-minute neighbourhoods, and all the things we talked about yesterday. It's that social inclusion, but that's not part of the SPIs, but it's things that we're doing with partners that are really helping our communities. And it was just kind of to highlight some of that. And when we're looking at joint working, I mean, one of my communities had offered because the library's not opened enough hours for them, they offered to help and support and have it opened by volunteers in their community. And that was looked favourably on by Steve Walsh from High Life Highland. But since then, there's, other unintended consequences have got in the road. So it's one size doesn't fit all, we said yesterday, and that's the same today. And some communities will be able to be doing more than others. So it's really about this. There are improvements, but it's the unintended consequences that's concerning me.
Councillor Grafton.
Thank you, convener. Thank you very much for the report. I need to recognise the amount of work that's been put into it and the figures that are really useful. Unfortunately, I apologise. I'm going to say, but I would like some more information, please, specifically on school attendance. I know Councillor Christie's already mentioned this. I'd like to know sort of the figures behind the figures. I believe some schools operate a condoned absence register where it's agreed that the pupil or whatever is off for particular reasons, whether the parents are taking them to Edinburgh Zoo, whatever. Maybe that included in the figures would actually be useful, so that we know what is sort of condoned and part of their education and not just people not being in school. I also need to say it's more a point than a question. The figures are very useful, they're very good, but what happens when we get to 98%? Do we then say, okay, we've achieved our targets, that's it? I would like to know about the small percentage, they might be 0.7% of the pupils who can't go to school because the environment isn't working for them. And please to not forget them. We might reach our targets, but it's not a point to give up. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Good morning, Convener. Thanks very much. Just a couple of quick points, really. First of all, just happy to see that the HLH performance is continuing to improve after the COVID epidemic, which quite a few members have mentioned. It's obviously good to see, and I know Councillor McLean has just mentioned that just now. I think generally, thank you to the officers for the report, as everybody else has said, a huge amount of work. Just one point, really, I think perhaps in some ways in defence of the planning service, and responding maybe to Councillor Stewart's comments, which he regularly seems to criticise the service. I think that most members of the council, and certainly the members of the planning committees, will understand the huge amount of volume of applications that the planning service has to face, and under some quite difficult circumstances. A lot of these applications are extremely complex, as I'm sure many members are aware, and especially wind farm applications, fish farm applications, which take up a huge amount of time for planning officers. And of course, the planning service, as many members will be aware, have lost experienced staff to the private sector. So I think nationally, we all know that there is a shortage of planners. And I understand that the council and the planning heads of planning are doing their best to attract new planners. I know in the report it says that there are one or two people who have managed to take onto the council's payroll, and that takes a time for them to settle. But my understanding even today is that the planning service is short of, I think, probably around about 5 planners, and certainly perhaps even a couple of enforcement officers, which I think that was mentioned at yesterday's, one of the items at yesterday's council. So it's just a matter perhaps of just defending that service, which I think does suffer from some unfair criticism. Thank you very much, Mayor.
I have 2 further members wishing to speak, Councillor Boyd and then Councillor Jarvie. After Councillor Jarvie speaks, I'll draw it to an end. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Donna, to you and your staff for what is one of the most useful reports that we receive, in my opinion. I've just got one question on adult services, appearing on page 211. It's a statistic about those who need long-term care over 65 who are actually receiving it. What are the percentage of that? This is reported on page 211, the first one. Now, we set ourselves a stretch target for this one because we know we've got to change things in this area. And we set a target of being 16th as opposed to 30th in the past. We didn't make that, and we've just held things. We're now at 31st. So we're not up to the average, but we're not as bad as some areas. I was wondering if you could tell us something about the detail behind this, and indeed if the information is available by area or even ward, which might help us to target action. Thank you very much, Donna.
Councillor Jarvie.
Good morning. Just 2 points. Thank you for the report. It's nice to see things laid out and to get an idea of numbers and the best value. One point is on the planners, and we're hearing again that's a shortage of that skill force. I think it was well reflected yesterday about how difficult a job the planners actually have, and I commend them for their honesty in saying they don't have the answers because they don't have the guidance. And I wonder if this is reflected across other departments in the way of efficiency, the lack of guidance from Scottish Government, that maybe we need to urge Scottish Government for guidance so decisions can be made swifter and easier and save time and have accuracy without things having to come back on repeat. The other point was about the libraries. You know, there's these targets. What they're, I really think within the empowering communities, then the Community Empowerment Act, that communities, we have all these consultations. Are they really listened to? Where's the target for a community value? There isn't a price in it, but I think it's a high value. I mean, their library, we're talking, you know, we hear that staff have been told they're moving into the new academy, a decision that hasn't totally been made officially. It's that is such high value to our community because of our community, and has been said before. I think enormous detrimental loss to move that library where it is fully accessible and offers so many services. It's a service that literally covers from babies to the elderly. It's every category, and it's more than just books. It's many things. And to lose that, I really think we need to look at community values when we're looking at moving things around or eradicating things, as it's really detrimental. Okay, thank you. Oh.
Okay, yeah, so I'll pick up a couple of things, convener, first and pass to my colleague. So on Councillor Grafton's points, so it's a statutory responsibility of parents to send their children to school, and schools can't condone absence. So that's just the rules. The actual issue sometimes happens that parents may wish for personal reasons to take their children out of school. That's not something a school can condone. And indeed, it can feed into deterioration in statistics. Now, in Scotland, we have an approach to that which is non-punitive, which is the part of a Scottish Government approach, which is we're working restoratively with families to try and encourage people to be included within schools. Obviously, there's in other parts of the country there are different approaches taken. I'll see what I can give you in terms of data, but I'm not sure I'll particularly be able to solve the actual issues you've asked about, but I'll see what else there is that we can send you, Councillor Grafton. And on the issue from Councillor Boyd about the balance of care, I would say probably this is the #1 issue that Highland Partnership needs to address, is how do we get better community care solutions, and how do we support our colleagues in the NHS and work in partnership with them to deliver. But I don't think any of us could be happy with the statistics, because what it means is you're much likely to end up in an institution in Highland than you are in other parts of the country. And obviously this is the #1 agenda, I think, that's sitting in adult social care and indeed in the Joint Monitoring Committee, and continues to be a thing we're trying to address through the adult social care strategy. So it's good to see it here. It's good it's highlighted. It is definitely the #1 thing we need to do. And of course, the solutions to that, community care at home, are incredibly important, but they are difficult to source, Councillor Boyd. So hopefully that answers your question.
Right. In response to Councillor McLean, I take your point about the unintended consequences. And as a number of members have picked up in the chamber today, there can be external factors affect our performance as well. Just to clarify, with regard to voids, we had a target of 35 days and we reported 32.1, so that's green. And I'm advised that our performance is favourable in comparison with most councils and housing associations. And furthermore, back in 2020, it was showing 44.2 days. So we've come down to 32.1, so that's a reduction of 12 days. So we are seeing an improving picture there. But I'm also advised that much of the delay is actually around utility companies with regard to clearing down meters and not actually in relation to the council works being undertaken. So again, that's another external factor affecting that performance. With regard to the queries from Councillor Jarvie, what I'd advise is the service have recently recruited 5 new planners, although we do recognise there's actually a national shortage of such individuals at the moment. And there are other posts out for recruitment as well. So we're hopeful that we'll see an increase in numbers. Thank you.
Members, with that, can we agree the recommendations, please? Donna, thank you very much for that. This is a hugely important report, and obviously with the number of questions you get, the members are really interested in this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, item 17 in your agenda is contract standing orders. Brian Porter's here to take any questions. Councillor Loud.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Mr. Porter, for the report and the review of contract standing orders. I'm not going to do a long introduction to this, and really just seek to move the recommendations as set out in the report, and invite members who have any questions on the changes being made to put those to Mr. Porter. And moving, I look for a seconder.
Councillor Willer.
Thank you, convener. Thank you for this report. I was particularly pleased to see section 6, the inclusion of sustainable procurement in this, because as I'm sure, well, most people probably know, scope 3 emissions are a major contributor to council's carbon emissions at the moment. So it's good to see highlighted in there that council is working to embed the principles of sustainability at all stages of procurement activities, and to ensure that social, environmental and economic impacts are considered throughout the procurement process. So just in relation to this, I've got a couple of questions. Are the best value economic, environmental, community outcomes that are listed, are they given equal status in terms of evaluating tenders? Because it would suggest in the statements within that section that they are. And if so, how are these outcomes actually weighted? And how will environmental and community outcomes be measured? How will the success be measured? And could you please clarify how this translates into the practicalities of evaluating tenders in terms of officers, you know, how will they be evaluated when carrying out the procurement process? And for example, will members of the climate change team be involved in this so that they can help with advice on the impacts on the council procurement process in terms of carbon emissions and the impacts on reduction targets? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Probably a few kind of relevant points, I think, just to make. So the contract standing orders, as I said in the report, they're focused primarily on compliance, as the name of the document suggests. There's obviously the legislative framework that the council has to follow, driven by best value. As you rightly note, there obviously are within the CSO's recognition of some of the wider sustainability agenda. For members on Corporate Resources Committee, the Council's procurement strategy and the annual reporting of that is considered through the Corporate Resources Committee, so there's always more detail there. And again, that might be something Councillor Willis or any member might wish to look at to see a little bit more detail. In terms of the evaluation, it really depends on the particular contract and procurement in question in terms of the criteria and weighting. The council does have a community benefit manager that works alongside the procurement team. There is very much a kind of collaborative approach to the procurement activity within the council. The procurement team itself is part of the shared service between this council, Aberdeen Shire and Aberdeen City. But I say the procurement approach takes account of input from, for example, community benefit manager, finance, in terms of thinking of the best value considerations. Climate change team will be involved in relevant procurement activity. I would need to check in terms of any sort of wider role and input to that and refer back to you. And I think probably the final point I think to say is, I mean, there's an element I think of sort of ongoing improvement and review in terms of the sustainability agenda. You know, one of the reasons the CSOs, the contract standing orders are in front of you today. We always do an annual review. That's part of a normal process. But again, as you'll see from the covering report, it's very much picking up on national change, national direction. So again, there's a constant sort of review and reflection. Clearly, we don't necessarily are in a position to influence all of that locally. Often it is national agenda and policy setting, which our CSOs then have to adapt and respond to. So I say, hopefully that's answered it. In terms of the kind of climate team, I say I may need to just reflect on that and perhaps come back to you with a more specific question, if that's okay.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, just a quick question to ask Brian Porter. What for him are the highlights that best channels as much money of the public's, you know, of our spend back into local communities, that local tradespeople can see the benefits for them? What for you are the standout or highlighted points that ensures that we're...
Councillor McPherson, Chief Executive.
Well, I think in our previous report, all I would say, Councillor McPherson, is in a previous report, in terms of community benefit, in terms of local supply chain, I think we're the top in the country for our local procurement. I mean, obviously, partly that's to do with our geography. And I think, whilst I'm giving you a broad answer, I think Brian's referred to ongoing improvement. And I think what we need to do is to nuance our processes as we go along, between to try to get value at a macro level of contracts, but also to try and manage and support our local supply chain. It's an ongoing challenge, but it is one the team is aware of, and we are continuing to think about how best to do that. I hope that I'm giving you an example, an answer. Broadly, we're really good at it if you look at the data, but that doesn't really cover what we're really trying to do, because we're more ambitious really in terms of how we support local businesses and supply chain.
Can we give you the recommendations, please? Item 18 is Treasury Management Strategy Statement. And again, Brian's here to take questions. Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Convener. And again, thank you, Brian, for this annual report. Again, I don't intend delaying questions to Mr. Porter on the contents of the report. You'll see in Appendix 1, you know, that there has been an increase in borrowing, but that increase is to fund capital investment. You know, and we have to undertake borrowing in order to do that. So members shouldn't be surprised to see that is being done. Clearly, the cost of those borrowings has risen as a result of the post-COVID cost of living crisis. So, you know, there is a restriction being placed on us there, but really, you know, we have to deal prudentially with that. That's what Mr. Porter does. So I move the recommendations in the report, look for a seconder, and hand over to members for questions on the report.
Councillor Oldham.
Yes, thank you, Convener. You started this morning by making the very valid points that we have far too much for full council. And this seems to me to be a classic report, which under the scheme of delegation, we should be able to handle corporate resources. Now, I'm fully aware, having looked at the papers, why we're having to do this here, because the CIPRA code of practice says that we have to. But that seems to be something that we should perhaps be tackling. Maybe Brian should be going back to CIPRA. I don't know whether that's something that's possible, or whether we can just look at whether we can just read our way around this to avoid doing this, and just not bring this here. This is a classic report which we could deal with well at corporate resources. Thank you.
Councillor Gill.
Convener, thank you for the report. I just want to focus on I mean, thanks to Councillor Loudon for talking about the increase in borrowing, and I fully appreciate if we're going to invest in schools and everything else, but we have to keep on borrowing and we have to do all those things. My concern is that there's a very limited focus on actually how we repay our capital. And then if we look at 11.4 there, the level of borrowing that we're going to have by 26-27 is £1.3 billion. Now, currently we're paying £60 million a year on loan charges. So increasing that by a third, we're talking about £80 million a year, and that's coming out of our revenue budget. We have to have a plan to start paying back our capital. Otherwise, we're going to keep on building this up. And the impact on our revenue budget is going to continue to grow, and that restricts the things we can do on the ground. And I think we really need to take the bull by the horns here. And I know this is the common way. This is what all local authorities do. They repay the capital, by interest only over years, and then we reborrow to finance it again, and it goes round and round in circles. And we're carrying debt that we've had here from the 60s and 70s, and we really have to start thinking about what we're going to do to protect our communities and our children and our grandchildren going forward, because we're heading down the road to bankruptcy in not too far a distant time. Thank you.
Councillor Fraser.
I'm really concerned about the amount of debt that we're carrying here. It's just getting horrendous now. To me, it's just getting out of hand. And I'll probably be paying off this till the day I die. And my grandchild is going to end up paying this for the next 25 years. His grandson or daughter will be paying for the next 25 years, and his great-grandson and daughter will be paying for this for another 25 years till it's eventually paid off. And I do think we should be doing something more to either curtail the amount of borrowing that we're taking on, or trying to repay a bit more of it and get it down. To me, it's just getting horrendous. As councillors, we just sit here, pass the stuff, and then we're off 3 to 4 years. We're off. The officers only 2 to 3 years, but I just feel it's a horrendous level of debt.
Well, there is, of course, an easy way. You just don't build anything. You just don't do anything. You just pay down debt. It's as simple as that. You don't want to build schools. You don't want to fix the roads. Yeah, no debt. It's quite easy. 20 years' time, you'll be sitting here in a council, or somebody will be, in a council with no debt. But you'll have no schools, you'll have no roads, you'll have no bridges, you'll have nothing. So there's a fine balancing line. Councillor Bremner.
Couldn't agree with you more. Councils have debt. That's a matter of reality. Governments, well, with the exception of the Scottish Government that isn't allowed to borrow, it's about affordability. It's about managing your debt. It's about understanding how you pay how you can afford to pay for your debt. And I think that is one of the focuses of council that has been challenging over many years. It's not just about the level of debt. Councils and the size of that council and the asset base of that council and their ability to be able to raise revenue to pay for debt, to manage the debt with the different interest rates and over a period of up to 60 years, as many of us have had in these workshops that we've been given by Brian. Thank you very much for them. There's still work to be done on that in our understanding and our ability to be able to see how we can best manage that going forward, but to make it work for our council and work for our communities and work for us, so that we can build schools, so that we can repair roads, so that we can see an improvement in our infrastructure, and without making it too political. It's not. You can have a large amount of debt, but if you've got the ability to be able to finance it and the ability to be able to manage it, then there is no reason why we can't look to reduce it, increase it according to what our needs dictate. Thanks.
Councillor Ballin. And I'm sorry, I've just missed somebody. I didn't write it down. Councillor Ballin.
Thank you very much. I'm always interested in the idea that when councils borrow money, it's debt. When private business borrows money, it's investment. I think we're investing in schools and roads and things like that. I think that's an important distinction to make. I'm grateful for this chance to see the report, and thank you very much for producing it. I've got a question about paragraph 13.5, if I may, which asserts that placing undue weight on environmental and social factors could have the effect of limiting the list of counterparty options. I think anybody who sees the news at the moment will be aware that the best returns on investment come from investing in things which kill people, followed by investing in things which pollute the planet for our children by drilling for oil and gas, and closely followed by companies which invest in opioids, alcohol, and companies which treat their employees very badly, like Amazon. So my question is, how do you balance human misery on the scale against maximizing the return on investments? Thank you.
Councillor Christie.
Of course, you mentioned human misery on the scale, Councillor Ballins, by not voting for St Clements yesterday. You talk about investing in schools and you didn't. But let's look at this. I suspect probably myself and Councillor Graham might be the only people who are actually councillors of an authority in the 1980s, which is a lifetime ago, which then, when we saw interest rates going right the way up, climbing up into the teens, the high teens, and I actually saw on the authority I was on at the time, the capital programme decimated totally because the council could just not afford the interest rates. And I suppose one of the dangers for us is at the point that Councillor Gale mentions of that big refinance. When we actually have our next big one, is what are interest rates going to be at that time, and what will it mean in terms of the revenue account? Authorities have always had that fairly special place of being able to borrow slightly cheaper than businesses and individuals. But I suppose the game changer might actually be the motion that the Greens are bringing later on, which is the power of general competence, which means that authorities, and my understanding of it is, authorities can borrow and lend money, in which case we would have been stupid not to, when interest rates were, 0.25% above the bank business rate, the Bank of England business level, of not taking money out for the future or taking money in order to make money on that money. So I think that could be the changing point, and we'll obviously discuss that later on. But I suppose it'd be interesting maybe for corporate resources, I agree with Councillor Oldham, maybe to have some various scenarios of what it will mean when we do try to refinance the debt if interest rates, and they always do within a generation or two, move to very unacceptable or very high levels. What could it mean for us, and what should this authority be doing in order to perhaps protect its position? Thank you.
Councillor Patters.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, we have no option. We have to borrow money. That is the only way we're going to get any schools, etc., built. Now, when Dingwall Academy was built, we had to borrow money. I had a very rough time from the public because we were borrowing money, but my goodness, what a joy. My children and now my grandchildren enjoy a fantastic school and to learn in, and I'm sure they won't mind if they have to pay it off, and for their children in the future. It is the only way we have. There isn't money. So, we all have to do it in our private lives. We borrow money to buy a house. So it's just what we have to do. So I agree with the convener, what he said. Thank you.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you. Just a very quick question to ask Brian Porter. What were any benefits from the Chancellor's budget for this council? Are there anything good news that we can look forward to from it? Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, convener. Councillor Balance, you'd asked about section 13 of the report in terms of environmental, social, governance related considerations. I think probably the important point to make in the context of this report, I mean, the report includes investment strategy. Investment is the term in legislation that we have to use. In reality, what that means in practice is on a daily basis, if the council is sitting in a position where it may have more cash in its bank account than it may need, we do, as per the strategy and as the council has agreed, try and seek an appropriate return on that cash, but do so in a very risk-averse fashion. So what section 13 is referring to is we rely on the credit rating agencies that are used across the globe in terms of assessing companies. Being in mind, primarily, these are money we're placing with financial institutions. It will be banks, major, high street and corporate banks, as well as certain other financial institutions. So we're driven, as per the strategy, primarily on a risk appropriate basis. It's not that many years ago. We can recall Icelandic banks and a range of issues. The last thing any council, any member, any officer would want to be in a position is whereby public funds have been lost through not considering risk in an appropriate way. So the section is very much focused on that. It's about risk. It's about then looking at return. So ESG considerations are part of it, but we are very much reliant on what credit ratings agencies such as Moody's, etc., their approach, which we'll follow. But also, this is quite a dynamic thing. This is on a daily basis. The officers having to make those judgments as to do we wish to place cash. Sometimes it may only be overnight, place cash in a certain institution overnight to seek an appropriate return. So these are not long-term investments. That's why I say the language of investment, I think, may not perhaps always be reflective of the reality. Often this can be short-term daily placing of funds, which is why, again, the use of existing rating agencies rather than anything more involved, I think is quite appropriate to the actual practice that's in place. Councillor McPherson, you asked about spring budget. I think in terms of the one specific item I would reference, you can recall in the context of the 29th February budget meeting, some supplementary information was issued. There was reference in the report to the potential of around £62 million of additional consequentials coming to Scottish Government through the spring budget, and Scottish Government's indications at that time that funding would come to local government subject to their assessment of that spring budget. So we still await a specific allocation to councils, but we do understand via Scottish Government that the spring budget has and will allow them to release that £62 million to councils, only those councils who froze council tax. We do anticipate that we will, in due course, receive a specific confirmed allocation of funding. But you recall this matter was both described in the report on the 29th of February and some of the supplementary information. So that's the only, I think, specific point I would probably highlight.
Members, can we give you the recommendations, please? Members, we now move to item 21 on your agenda, and the council has asked to resolve that under section 50 of the Local Government Scotland Act, the public should be excluded from the meeting for item 22 only.